I'd like to introduce the three people from Camfil that will be on the line with Sean O'Reilly as he does his presentation of the new Creo software. The first person is Lynn Lackey, and she's our Director of Marketing for North America. My name is Charlie Cipher, and I'm the Manager of Marketing and Technical Materials. We'll be kind of facilitators in the background. If anybody has any questions, the proper way to do it today would be to type your question over on the right-hand side, and we are familiar with the upcoming slides, and if they're simple questions, we'll handle them separately over there. If not, then we will make sure that Sean has them when he gets to the end of his final presentation. When Sean does get to the end of his final presentation, then there's a feature in this software called raising hands, and then at that point he'll ask if there are any questions, and just click that little icon and we can unmute you and we'll be ready to go. Sean's our Global Director of Sales for three different segments: Life Sciences, which is basically pharma or biopharma, semiconductor, and custom OEM. So he'll be doing an introduction of Creo today, which is basically a clean room energy optimization design software. Please limit extraneous calls with cell phones or other lines. And probably the most critical thing is if you have to take another call, it's better that you actually hang up the phone and redial back in, because what happens to the attendees online is we either hear your company's music or those type of annoying clicks and that type of thing that are sometimes associated with calls on hold. But remember, if you have any short questions, type them in on the side. Critical questions, hold till the end, and then Sean will address them accordingly. Sean?
Thank you, Charlie. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to just give you the background to how Creo started and what the concept was and is behind it. Some of the online might be able to have used our clean room design software, which was something we developed in the mid-90s in Europe, a simple selection program, and we've had lifecycle costs since the early 90s, mainly aimed at HVAC. So the idea with a colleague of mine in Ireland, Don Donovan, actually it's over 5 years ago now, we had the thought to combine clean room design and lifecycle costs, with the energy sustainability sort of discussions. We wanted to be able to add an energy component to the clean room software, especially on the HEPA filter side. So that's how the concept simply started. And then, of course, being the people we are, we pushed our R&D teams in Sweden and Asia to give us some extra things, one of them being, once we've inputted the data, that you can actually press, a button and generate a spec. So with that, I'm going to go straight into the software. I'll start with the original software. If you haven't seen it, it's called Clean. It's still, very useful. I use it, weekly for some application or reason. It's in SI and US units. I think most people online are North American based today. If not, I'm sure you can understand both languages, as we all have to do these days. But basically, you look at the system you're interested in, excuse me, which is turbulent, unidirectional, typically for a clean room. So let's talk about turbulent. And ventilation efficiency. We'll get into that more background onto that discussion in Creo. Typically it's 70%, I would say, for turbulent. You can plug in the recirc value, recirculation air, so let's say 70%. Air change rates, big discussion, as we all know today, as far as, an energy hog. What's the correct number of air changes? We'll use 20 for this example. We have the option of putting people in here. Airflow is a function of the air change rate, obviously. And then we can put in the height, the width. We can select any number here. Length. We can look at a particle size we're interested in, 0.1, 0.3, 0.5. I think You know, a lot of us have classified clean rooms in the old language at 0.5 micron. We can look at the outside air, you know, where the facility is located. This really only affects the cleanup time, so I'd always select worst case condition. It defaults at the number of particles in the room at the start. That's really, again, affects the cleanup time, how quick you get to your steady state. I'll show you a graph on that in a sec. And if you know the particles from the process, which I know is rare, but if you have that data, you can put it in there. And you know, the biggest contaminant in the room is us people. The older software, the one you're looking at right now, has sort of 4 classifications. With Creo, we've added more science to the particle shedding by using a standard, which I'll go through later. So good clean room flows, which in this case is 1,000 particles per second shedding. So very simple, very quick, high-level information. You then go on to the filter selection, and all we're doing here is just looking at filter efficiency. For the US folks or North American folks, this is European language, so G4 is like a MERV 7 or a 30% ash rate filter. F7 is 85 on MERV 13. We can put up to 3 steps in the makeup air, including HEPA. I'm going to just put 2 in this example. And then the thermal filter. I think you're all familiar, hopefully, with H14, you know, European E1922 standard. Now, this is looking, it's given us lots of 9s, but it's at the particle size we selected. So if I go back and change this, for instance, you know, it's a mathematical program, so you're going to see this is going to change. So I'll just bring that back to 0.5 micron. And you can see, you know, it's going to give us the ISO classification, but I think graphically, more interestingly, I guess, for most people, you can see after, you know, approximately 1 hour or so that we reach the steady state of, you know, ISO 3. Now, there's nothing in this room. So if I added some people here, you know, the room is what, 1,200 square feet, 4 people. You can see the increase in particulate, and it went from ISO 3 to basically class 100, ISO 5. You know, you can play around with different combinations of series of filters in the makeup air. You know, some people think, you know, especially in semiconductor, you know, we're using U17 filters, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9s in the filter. Doesn't necessarily mean, you know, a better clean room classification, but often, you know, I asked that question many years ago, and my answer from a technical person was people want the best. So I think, you know, today we can be smarter how we select products and make sure we optimize and minimize energy consumption. One of the examples I talked about this morning, we had another one of these webinars at 9 this morning. I know in Puerto Rico on an application, a particular end user had 3 steps of filters. In fact, 4 steps, but they had HEPA here in the makeup air. And we wanted to, you know, look at, well, there's really no need for that HEPA filter before the HEPA, so we said we'd look at downgrading to E10 or 95% DOP to take advantage of the energy savings. And one of the things that we looked at was, would it impact the room classification? And of course, it was minimal or no impact. So there's a number of reasons why you can use this particular software. So that's the short, quick version of the old. You know, it didn't have any energy component to it. So what I want to do is go straight to Creo. Before we start, if you click on top, once you get access, you'll see an information section here under Creo. And this is where we've added a lot of support information. You know, we have a Creo manual here, which is, I think people who got invited to the webinar from from Lynn would have got a copy of that Creo manual. We've published a fairly new publication recently. It's called Life Science Industry Insights. Talked about what's gone on the last few years, and there's a lot of interesting articles from people within Camfil and people outside of Camfil. We have this in English and Spanish printed as well. There's a Creo worksheet. You know, when we launched this internally, probably a year ago, you know, when we started the first beta version, amongst our internal colleagues and our representation, one of the feedbacks was that we'd like to have, you know, a worksheet so that, you know, we could jot down the information, then come back and do a more detailed selection with the software. So that's what we did, and they're available through your local Camfil representative. A lot of stuff here. I'm not going to spend too much time, but there's different filter classes and energy classification from Camfil, and particle generation, ventilation efficiency is always an interesting discussion, and so on and so forth. So that's a good place to go to start to access. There's also, I will say before I forget, there's a Creo user guide here, and that's basically a PowerPoint in PDF that we've you know, walked you through the software screenshot by screenshot. So if you do get stuck, you know, there's something you can refer back to there as well. Okay, so, you know, this is fairly standard stuff. You have the project name, consulting engineer. I think a lot of you online are consulting engineers, so you can put in, if you're working in a different country or a different currency, you can change that to multiple different currencies, depending on where you are. You can either hit the running conditions here or just go to next. So if we click next, you know, when we talk about life cycle costs in terms of HVAC filters, we're looking at shorter time periods, obviously, you know, 1, 2, maybe 3-year periods. When we looked at Creo, you know, there's a HEPA component, so we took 10 years as a fair life cycle. You know, you can change that. There's different opinions about lifetime, and I know it can be a lot more in microelectronics and sometimes less in pharma, but we've got to start somewhere, so we selected 10. And each time you hover the mouse over these icons, there's a short explanation. So again, it's another, should help you, you know, explain why we selected what we selected. So 10 years for LCC. You know, you're running the fan system operating hours. We default. These are all default values. It's at 24/7. You can put in your energy cost. Of course, that varies depending on where you are. Energy cost increase over that period. Interest rate on capital employed. Labor cost. You know, originally we had just one value in there, and then when we thought about it more, we said, hang on, it's going to be more to change a HEPA filter than it is to change a pre-filter. So we put 2 values in here. You know, we put $5 for pre-filter and $50 for HEPA. If you have some harder data, then please, you know, put that in there yourself. You can change it. We have labor cost increase here. And like in our LCC software, LCC Green software, we have a CO2 calculator. We use 600 grams per kilowatt hour. That's really based on, you know, the average fuel source from Europe and US, whether it's nuclear or coal. Again, if you know that value, depending on, you know, your facility or where you're designing the project, then you can change that value. So we hit next. So now we get a schematic of the room, and here you have some different solutions. You know, you can look at makeup air, exhaust air, recirc air, terminal filters, unidirectional. And I think most of you know we have a sister company, Camfil APC, our dust collector group. You know, often in a solid dose facility, API, you know, maybe a potent compound facility, there's often a dust collector off a tablet press or a tablet cutter. And often downstream you have a safety filter, a bag-in, bag-out HEPA. So, we have that option too. One thing we haven't got yet is the lifetime calculations on cartridges within the dust collector, but that's data we're collecting. So once that's done, we'll input it. But you at least have the option of including airflows when you're looking at the design. So I think for to keep this fairly simple, I'll we'll just use makeup air, thermal filters, and an exhaust low wall return housing. The 5-star solution I'll come back to at the very end when we're done. So now we go next, and here, like the original software I showed you, we can put in the height of the room, the width. We'll pick some numbers here. Air change rate. Let's pick a number. Makeup air. In the older software we had recirc, which so makeup's the opposite to recirc. So 20% makeup air, 80% recirc. You could have 0 there. So we'll run with 20%. And one thing when doing this and speaking to some colleagues and people in the industry, leakage factor had a much bigger impact than I thought. So we put that calculation factor in there. Right now it's in a percentage number, and that's going to give you an airflow value. So you probably have to if you know what that leakage is in volume, or you put an airflow in, you've got to calculate backwards by playing with the percentage value. So let's put 2% in here. If we're doing a dust collector calculation, we'd add that there. Ventilation efficiency, how well supply mixes with return. This is an important factor, as a lot of people know, and I refer to the ISPE HVAC guidelines, and my colleagues in Sweden obviously involved. So we come up with 70% as the factor for a turbulent application. And fan efficiency, that's always a discussion with me, at least. We have this in our software, LCC software. It's interesting to see what that number is. No disrespect to the fan people, but the lower that number is. We did a study recently in Europe of 760 fans, mix of all sorts of fans, and the average efficiency, and I don't want to be controversial, but that's what was measured, was 33%. And that has a huge impact on, the life cycle cost number or total cost number, in the filter's favor. So there's a bigger saving, but I'm not going to get into that debate right now. So it's 60% default value. So here we can look at the particle size, like we did earlier. You can look at the outside air, people in the room option, like the earlier software. And on the clean room garments, the closed side, we've added classification. And this came from the Helmke drum test, which some of you might be familiar with. It's a test where you're basically putting garments into a tumble dryer, and you're measuring the shedding from the garments over time. As you wash the garments, you measure, and you get this different classifications. So class 1 being the best. So we're just trying to add more science to and support information to this critical factor. People and air change rate seems to be the biggest subjects today. I know it is within ISPE, that's for sure. Particle concentration at the start, that's at default value I mentioned earlier, and if we had the particles from the process, you could add it in there. So now, once we put the data in, we've populated the volumes, and we have the total volume, that 20% makeup air, leakages, and exhaust air. And the next step is to basically populate the software with the filters. So like in our LCC, this is not as advanced as the LCC, or we haven't as many options right now, but you can look at it in two ways, looking at final pressure or time. You know, if you're changing on PM, you know, which often is the case, or, you know, pressure drop ideally is the best solution if you could. We looked at the product groups. We've basically 4 categories, and, you know, a pleated pre-filter, panel filter, pocket bag filter, and a V-bag filter. So if we take a pleat, which is probably more common in the US, 3030 is a brand of Camfil, but if you didn't know what that was, we just added this 2-inch or 4-inch pre-filter, you know, MERV 8 or G4. You then select the filter. We've only gone for 2 types, 2-inch and 4-inch. We then go to the makeup air. This is the default pressure drop and a price here. You have a frame normally used for the pre-filter. This is a frame with clips you're familiar with for the air handler. We've just launched a new frame. It's called a fast frame. There's no clips at all, and it can, you know, put in different combinations of filters. So that's something very interesting for the end user. And if we have 2 steps, we'll select the second filter. Let's go for V-bank. Unfortunately, we have some differences in names in Camfil, but in North America, we call this V-bank filter Durafil. In Europe, we call it no-pack-fill. So we'll stick with the North American numbers right now. And we've just put in 3 efficiencies. So we'll start with, say, MERV 13 or F7. You know, we've put in a default pressure drop here and a price, and then a frame for that filter too. So we just go to next, and the next solution was the terminal filter. The pleated, or the Megalamp panel, as we call it, is the filter of choice, not used in the plenum or in the terminal housing. We've kept this as simple as possible. You know, we're going to add more as we develop this, but we just went with 2x2 and 4x2, 2-inch and 4-inch pack. And we went for H14, which is 90% of the applications from an efficiency point of view, in life sciences at least. What you see here is calculated automatically the number of filters required for that volume of air we put in. You know, because its default value is 90 feet per minute, or 0.45 meters per second. So if there's more volume, we've got to do it by either reducing the number of filters. If I change this to 10, you know, and then click this calculate verified button, you'll see that the velocity's gone up to 130 feet per minute, or 0.65 meters per second. So we'll bring it back to 15. Default budget number in there. And then here we have the terminal housing commonly used, which is the pharmaceal. And again, you have 2 options, you know, 4x2, 2x2. It populates the same quantity in a number. And then we go to the exhaust air. Let's put a pre-filter in front of the low wall return housing. In Europe, we have an eco pleat, which is more of a mini pleat filter with higher efficiency as an option. Let's go for a 4-inch filter in this case. You'll see it's calculated the number of filters there. And on the exhaust side, that's based on 500 feet per minute default value, or 2.5 meters per second. Again, a final pressure drop, a price, and then with different housings on the exhaust side. You know, some of the Pharmatane is a wall-mounted bag-in, bag-out housing. I'll show you a photo of it there. But in fact, let's select, we'll select the wall-mounted pharmaceutical. We'll do that again. This one here. So that's just a simple low wall return housing, you know, with a pre and HEPA with a top entry connection in that case. And it's, obviously same quantity and the price. And then we're done. We've selected the volumes, we've selected the products, and we just simply click Save. And then here you're going to get basically a summary of the data we put in. The room dimensions, a summary of the filter groups we selected, the filter housings, the total system pressures. This is the actual HEPA filter we selected, and I think this is an interesting report, one I showed you earlier. In this example, I think we've nothing in the room there, so it's an ISO 2.3 room, and then there's that steady state condition, which is around the 60 minutes or so, 40 minutes in this case. It starts to bottom out. If you go to reports, you're going to see a lot of interesting information here. You can look at each section individually. So if I look at the makeup there, I can look at it now, I can save it to a folder, or I could email it. I'll show you an example of that real quick. If I email this to George Rossi's online. But this is basically a simple PDF report of similar to our lifecycle cost software. We selected this pleated pre-filter with the V-Bank secondary filter. It gives you all the specifications for the filter and the initial, final, and average pressure drop across the filters. It's going to tell us over that 10-year period you're going to change those pre-filters 33 times, and so there's 2+ year lifetime for that secondary filter in the environment we selected. It gives you the CO2 footprint calculation over that time period and the landfill impact as well. And here we'll get our total cost, our total life cycle cost to run those particular filters in that given environment for that period of time. If we go back here, you can do the same for that terminal filter. Let's look at it directly. Similar to what you showed on the general report, but in addition to that, you have pressure drop curves and initial and maximum clean pressure loss. There's variances in the paper, so you're going to get both values. We're always quoting maximum clean, but there's typical and maximum pressure drops across the filter. There's penetration, which is the opposite of efficiency for HEPA, and then you've efficiency curves at MPPS, the most penetrating particle size. Clean room classification, that's where you get that steady state condition report. We can go back and add people there. We could look at changing air change rates, do some other things, and then you can see the result you're going to get, or add more people, less people, so on and so forth. Exhaust. There's an executive summary here too, where we're actually summarizing all the information we put in, and it gives you a high level, the total cost for the makeup air, the terminal filters, and the exhaust. And if I was a designer, I'd be doing that initially, and then selecting different filters. We selected a 4-inch pack for the terminal, so if we, which is the better option. But if we went back to the 2-inch pack, you're going to have a higher pressure, higher life cycle, and then it's going to give you the reason to justify why we selected the, the filter with the lowest pressure. So, the final piece of the pie here is the specification. So once we've added all the info, excuse me, you can click on this specification icon here. It's going to take a minute to calculate. It's gathering all the specs for all those filters we selected. And it's in Word. And it's basically, we start from what we selected for the makeup air. We had that pre-filter. We had the Durafil secondary filter. We had the fast frame. We had 2 of them, so it's going to give it to you twice. We selected the Megalamp panel for the pharmaceutical housing, and here you get a very detailed spec, and we understand you've got to put in, brand X as a consulting engineer in some cases, but you're going to get a spec to the latest norms. I think that's the most important thing. We go right through IEST and EN 1822 standards, so we have a up-to-date gel information in the specification. Same for the gaskets. Labeling, packing, all the usual stuff. So that's a very detailed spec. And the same for the thermal housing. Here you have to select, what damper, what aerosol injection, what construction, material, stainless, aluminum, what type of trim, and so on. But the spec is generated, and then, with support from your local Camfil representative, they can walk you through the specification. And I think we had, we had a pre-filter and the low wall return housing. I actually didn't select the HEPA filter for the low wall return, but I would have selected a V-bank HEPA, high capacity HEPA. Okay, so if we go back to the beginning here, I mentioned, we had this 5-star button, and here we've added sort of preloaded different combinations. So if you follow my logic at least, we had a 2-step makeup air, a thermal housing, exhaust housing, we had a recirc housing, and we had a dust collector and bag in, bag out. So I tried to put every possibility we can put into this example. So if we just click it, it's loaded, and you just click next, and you can see there you have every possibility of solution we put in this example. I'll just save it here now and go to reports. So we could do the same thing. You could look at these modules individually and also generate the spec. And that's it. I don't think it's a complicated software. I know if I was involved in it, it's definitely not complicated. I want to keep it as simple as possible. And there's a lot more smarter people than me who's more familiar with clean room design. But, the intent from the beginning was to try and add that energy component to the clean software we had. And, the feedback so far has been excellent. And, we're already working on development for version 2. So I'm not sure if people are asking questions or not, because I can't see any of that. But just before we do open up for questions, I'm sure some people are thinking, how do I get access to this? Before I show you that, we are adding some more products to the software. This is a slimline module. It's not a fully loaded pharmaceutical. It's a basic housing, so that's in the works. Just so you know, people familiar, it's just a basic extruded housing with a room-side replaceable filter. And we're adding different box-style HEPA filters, so you compare different solutions against V-banks to justify the better selection. And also adding higher efficiency Megalamp panels, U15, maybe U16 for more micro applications. There's a screenshot of that worksheet I mentioned. And as far as access, if you go to camfil.us, at the bottom of the page, there's a link here called Creo Access Request. And you'll see this screen. Fill in the blanks and go to our system, and we will try to give you access to the software. What's not going to happen is, people with private emails, the names that we're not that familiar with, there's going to be a roadblock. And I know sometimes due to your own IT guys, you can download software. But if you contact me directly, or the local Camfil representative, and we understand who you are and where you're from, we've absolutely no issue giving you access to the software.
Sean?
Yes.
We have one question from Wei Sun.
Okay.
Do you want me to unmute him yet? Let me know when.
This is the last slide, and then we can open up, Charlie.
Okay.
So once we do sign up, you'll get this invite from me, and you have 48 hours to register, or the invite expires. So when you get that invitation, try and log on directly. It doesn't mean you can't do it again. You have to go through the exercise more than once. Once you do get the Creo invite, I encourage you to register within 48 hours. So, perfect timing.
Okay, Wei, you've been unmuted. You can talk, and everybody can hear you, including the attendees. Hello, Wei?
Yes.
Sean's looking. He's ready for your question now.
Yeah, my question was, is it free to download the software, and how to get it?
Okay. We have absolutely you can get access to the software, and I'll just repeat what I said if someone missed it. You can go to camfil.us, and that's the web link, and at the bottom of the page, you'll see this little link here called Creo Access Report. If you click that link, you'll see this. You fill in your name, your email, the company you're with, and so on, and that will be registered with Lynn and Charlie. They will get that to me, and then once I see that, I can, through a ticket registration in the software, input your email. You'll get an invite from Creo, and like I said, once you get that invite, you need to register within 48 hours, or we've got to go through the process again. So, I guess in exchange for the software, what I'd like to get, and I know you've been involved in the ASHRAE new clean room guide. I'd like to get some constructive feedback, because I absolutely want to listen to the experts like yourselves and try and use software. So, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, this is very good software, and I'm sure ASHRAE TC 911 members will be very interested to review it and possibly use it.
Yeah, no, I'd love you to use it, Wei, and the whole group. And I know I'm like a distant member of that group, but I've not really much input. But I'm happy to give access to that group, and absolutely, I'd really encourage feedback, because we learn from each other for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, it took exactly the same time as it did this morning, 39 minutes, which is a miracle with someone like me speaking. But if there's no more questions, like I said, try and download it, or you can contact me directly. If you want to set up something specific for, your own organization, then contact your local Camfil branch or distributor, and we'll be happy to go through this again in more detail. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen, and take care. Bye-bye.